This segment is an example of setting a typical scene in a simulationist immersive campaign. Now, to look at a more typical scene. Setting a typical scene is much easier than launching the first scene, even though more details will be in motion in the background, because it is completely unfettered by any narrative considerations created by the use of its collaborative setup, and it's only as limited by system as your situation requires. Anything can happen as long as it's in character for everybody in the scene, PC and NPC. Unlike a narrative game, where the goal is to provide something interesting in each scene, and each scene should advance the story in some way, in simulation, the goal is to set the scene and enjoy what happens, regardless of what it is. So a typical scene, entering a bar. Entering a bar, for example, like a typical, unplanned, in-character, in-game event, carrying with it no great implications on the overall events of the world. What do you do with it? How do you make it interesting? Short answer, you don't. The characters do. If the characters head into a bar, you start imagining what, and more importantly, who is in there. Both players and GM are working hard here. Both the players and the GM are working as hard as each other. So the players are creating scenery with their questions and statements, and keeping things in motion via their actions. And the GM is creating scenery and adding motion through description. And I'd like to go into that now, but we'll get into that in a later clip. Depending on the type of place chosen, and the conditions going on in the world at that time, the condition of the characters at that time, and so on, the people in the bar will react as real people would to the arrival of a group of people that look like those characters. Do they fit in? Do they choose to fit in? Are they interesting and likely to invite interaction, consciously or unconsciously? As they walk into the bar and do whatever they intend to do in there, be walking into that bar yourself in your mind's eye, populating it with reasonable assortments of appropriate people, and don't sweat the small stuff. Whatever happens in there happens, and it doesn't have to relate to, bolster, demonstrate, link up with, or otherwise mean anything. The characters. Choosing actions based on their perspective, through the eyes of the character, as if that character, the world, and all its laws and consequences were real, will behave according to reason as that character sees it. The NPCs will each be being fleshed out by the internal logic of your game world, and they may be proactive, reactive, or non-reactive, depending on that logic. If you have a group of tired, bespectacled occultists limping in to an underworld bar wearing tweed and ordering tea, they may have to endure vicious taunting. If they flaunt access to portable resources such as a portfolio of credit cards, wads of cash, they may invite a non-refundable donation request in a dark alley after they leave the establishment. If they blend in, they get to have their conversation in a bar, and we enjoy that. Things are as boring or as interesting, as funny or as sad or whatever, as your group makes them. They are not, by default, anything in particular. Real-world example. Long, long ago, when Werewolf was new, I was running a Mortals extension to a cross-vampire werewolf chronicle that eventually incorporated all the game lines. So I was running a Mortals extension to the Werewolf Chronicle in this larger chronicle. And the group, obviously, were using troop-style play. The mortal characters were used much less than any of the other supernatural characters. Again, obviously. So especially less often than these werewolves. So during a full moon, while the pack was protecting a bond, the characters, as their werewolf characters, inadvertently killed a man in the woods, and they tore him to shreds. Now the group were on a real high, and this was kind of a fun and exciting scene, and they got off on the violence, and they also got off later on the regret. Some were really quite disturbed by what they had done. This was really one of their first violent scenes in Werewolf, and the vast difference between a werewolf and a mortal was made extremely and graphically clear. We ended the session there. And the next session, the Arun, who was really the actual killer, was going to be absent, and I knew that. So the first scene of the next night had me handing out the mortal sheets, telling them to roleplay getting ready for dinner, and talking about the current group project that existed for them in the Chronicle. So as they're getting into character, I have the police arrive and inform them that the remains of their father had been recovered by park officials. Authorities were out looking for a bear, the only large type of predators known to be in the area. But foul play had not yet been ruled out. The rest of the evening was spent in very intense roleplay that I had nothing to do with. All I had happen was the very logical, realistic action of the police coming to tell them, "We're very sorry, your father has been murdered." The roleplay was all done based on what those characters would actually do, which was setting up a funeral, protecting family secrets — they were a group of occultists — and then the investigating of family enemies. And I will never forget how the group spontaneously took the news, totally compartmentalized the fact that they knew how he died, unabashedly, openly role-played their grief at the death, eulogized the character, buried the character, and then began a concerted effort to find out what caused his death. Was it Mother Nature, the bear, or an enemy? Truly great stuff. Thanks for watching. The next installment of this series will be on interactive description in simulation.